So today we're going to be using standard form equations, and we're still going to be thinking about picking good x's and good y's. Now with a standard form equation, it's going to be a little bit different. As we look down at the equations here, I have 4x minus 2y equals negative 4. So we can still go with x equals 0. That's always a good choice. But let's go ahead and see what that looks like when we plug in x equals 0 this time. So x equals 0. When I plug that in, that gives me 4 times 0. Oops. I'm going to switch this early on. So I'm going to make that a negative 2y over there. Plus negative 2 times y, which I still don't know, is equal to negative 4. So what multiplication or subtraction can I already do? Fernando? Yeah, 4 times 0. That's going to be 0. Plus negative 2y is equal to negative 4. Right, so does that 0 plus negative 2y really amount to anything? Kip yes or kip no. Does that 0 plus negative 2y really amount to anything? No, so that 0 really just cancels out, leaving us with negative 2y equals negative 4. Well, how am I going to figure out what y is? We always just used to just multiply and add, and that was all we had to do, right? How am I going to figure out y here? Michael? Yeah, we have to divide. We have to solve this equation. Divide by negative 2. That's a bad date. Negative 4 divided by negative 2 gives me 2. It's a good date. Good date. Yes, that was a good date, despite what I said, it being a bad date. It is a good date because we have a negative divided by a negative, so that gives us the positive 2. Thank you for the correction. All right, so that was relatively easy, definitely a lot more difficult. So think back yesterday when we said in the video that equations are normally already solved for y. And the reason for that is it saves you work trying to solve for y when you plug in an x. Now, since it is a standard form equation, the next value we're always going to choose to make it a little bit easier, we're actually going to choose a value for y this time. And we're going to choose 0, because 0 is so lovely to work with. So for a standard form equation, choosing 0 for y, that's going to be really nice for us, and I'm going to show you why. No pun intended. All right, so this time when we plug in y is equal to 0, we're plugging in for y. So we have 4 times x. Okay, we don't know x in this one because we didn't choose an x. Plus negative 2 times 0 equals negative 4. Well, we can go ahead and do some multiplication here. I can go ahead and do this negative 2 times 0, which is just 0. Gives me 4x plus 0 equals negative 4. But once again, does that plus 0 end up amounting to anything? By the way, what property is that? Yeah, it's the additive identity. That's why it tells us that it is just 4x. Okay, so 4x is equal to negative 4. How am I going to figure out what x is? Adriana. Divided by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1, gives us x is equal to negative 4 divided by 4. Bad date, negative 1. So when we come back over to our xy table, our x for when y is equal to 0, our x is equal to negative 1. So the next one is the tricky part. All right, what do we choose for this last value? What do you think? For what? X or Y?
X.
1 for X?
Yeah.
All right, let's see what happens. So when we choose X is equal to 1, gives me 4 times 1 plus negative 2y equals negative 4. 4 times 1 is plus negative 2y is equal to negative 4. Uh-oh, this one's a little bit more difficult. What do I need to do to solve this equation? This is why we've been doing a lot of equation solving practice recently on our do nows and our homeworks. Katie? Don't want to add a positive 4 to each side, because if I add a positive 4 to this positive 4 on this side, that's going to give me 8. So instead of adding positive 4, what do I need to add, Katie? Negative 4. So negative 4 plus 4 plus negative 2y plus negative 4, or excuse me, equals negative 4 plus negative 4. Negative 4 plus 4 on this side, that's 0. So that gives me negative 2y equals negative 4 plus negative 4 is negative 8. Jose, now what do I need to do to solve this, finish solving this equation?
Divide negative 2.
Yep, divide both sides by negative 2. Gives me y is equal to 4. So that definitely worked out for us. In this case, 1 ended up being a good choice. So we plugged in x was 1, and our result y was 4. So now we want to graph these 3 points to make sure that everything's A-OK. 0, 2. Negative 1, 0. And 1, 4. And break out your straight edge. Thanks, Daniel. Not Daniel. Your name's not Daniel. Juan. I don't even know where Daniel came from. We don't even have a Daniel. What is wrong with me? Thanks, Juan. And that should be our line. Now, raise of hands. Who prefers standard form equations? You rather do this than the slope-intercept form equations yesterday? Yeah, it's a rough deal. Slope-intercept form is a lot easier to deal with. That's why, again, in the video it said equations are usually already solved for y. It makes it easier for us to graph them, okay? We're going to be learning more throughout this unit about ways to make this a little bit easier, but we need to make sure that we understand plug and chug first to be able to make sure that we can do that. So, for this problem, moving on to the second one, what values do we want to choose? Malcolm. Yeah. You had your hand up. What values do we want to choose? 1, negative 1, and 0. This is standard form. I think there's some better choices for standard form. Michael. 0 for what else? 1 for y. What else? We need one more point. Rebecca? 0 for y. So with standard form equations, you always want to pick your two zeros. 0 for x, 0 for y. From there, we're going to have to be a little bit sneaky because actually I think we're going to find that we're not really going to like what happens when we plug in 1. So let's just see what that looks like. Let's do these other two first. So when x is equal to 0, that gives me 4 times 0 plus y equals 8. Yeah, that one turns out totally easy because that's just y equals 8. Super fortunate on that one. When y is 0, that was our next point. So we're plugging in for y this time, not x, so x is still there. So that's just going to cancel out, giving me 4x is equal to 8 divided by 4. X is equal to 2. So that one's really nice. And let's go ahead and try, what did we say? Y equals 1. So that's 4x plus y is 1 equals 8. What do I need to add to both sides? -1. So we need to cancel out this +1 over here. So we can get that x closer to being alone. So 4x is equal to 7. What's the unfortunate thing that seems to have occurred here? Graciela? Yeah, we don't get a perfect number. Like, we don't get a whole number answer here. We don't get an integer answer here. So we end up getting, if we do this math, we end up getting 1.75. So we can't really graph that. But let's think really quickly. And let's think really quickly back to, what did we say the point of the third point was? How many points does it actually take to graph a line? 2. So the third point is really just a check. So if we graph those 2 points that we have, 0, 8, that's over 0 and up 8, and 2, 0, and we take our straight edge through those 2 points. Thanks, Juan. If you do a really good job making sure you get through those corners, which I didn't do a really good job here, we can check to see if that point really does exist. So I'm going to go up to y1, and I'm going to go over. And I'm going to look to see where that hits with the x. So here at y1, I'm going to use a different color here really quickly, so we can see what I'm doing here. I'm going to come over to y1, and I'm going to see where it hits my line, and I'm going to come down. Where does it hit my line? It looks like at about 1.5, okay? So that means that our line's probably slightly off, but is that really close to our 1.75? Yes. So choosing that third x or y, I normally am going to suggest choosing x instead of y, because I think for a lot of you that's going to make a lot more sense when you're trying to go through and check to see if that point is really on your line or not. But 1 is fine. There are other things you can do to try and make it come out evenly. If you look at the numbers and you can look at it and think ahead of time, well, if I want this division to come out evenly, I would need something that was going to make this a factor of 4. So this is already a factor of 4, so I would need y to be a factor of 4. So if you're thinking ahead and you're really thinking about those things before you do the addition or subtraction and you plug in, you can definitely choose x and y values that are better. But in the end, that third point is really just a check. So you can graph it with the 2 points, and then even if you get a decimal for that third point, you can still check to see if it's in about the right place. Okay? Are there questions about that? Okay, so let's hit some key points about graphing standard form equations using plug and chug. Remember that one of the most important things about graphing standard form equations or graphing any equation is choosing appropriate values. So that's definitely going to be one of our key points. So who's got the key point on that one? I'm not going to give it to you. I'm just going to give you a sentence starter. When graphing standard form equations, Manuel, what do you think? Plug in 0 for x and chug. Huh? Oh, yeah, I'll fix that in a second. When graphing, plug 0 for x and chug, then plug 0 for y and chug. What about that third point? Not our third key point, but what about that third point? Katie? Yeah. So over here, we're going to say our second key point. The third point doesn't have to come out as a whole number since it is just a check. And in parentheses, I'm going to put my suggestion just because I think it's easier to understand. Always choose an x value. That's just my suggestion. We chose a y value in that last problem, and it turned out just fine. But I think for most of us, the way that we see that graph and the way things are graphed, most of us are going to understand a lot better if we are choosing an x value. How to check that. Okay. Are there any questions about our teacher time work for today? Okay, so today's a little bit more difficult. You have to pay a lot more attention to that equation solving. Flip on over to your together time, and I'm going to give you 10 minutes because these problems are a bit time consuming because you end up solving like 3 equations for each.